Howdy. Welcome back to Dion Talk. If you want to reach financial freedom by investing in real estate, bear with me, dual intro here. Howdy. Welcome back to Dion Talk. If you want to reach financial freedom by investing in real estate, in this video, I want to talk about 3 mistakes I would like you to not make. I am not sure if I made all 3 of these, but when I first started investing, I think I tried to make every single mistake that there is. One of these mistakes I don't want you to make comes from a conversation with a tenant where a tenant told me the funniest thing a tenant has ever said to me. If this is the first time to my channel, the purpose of my content is to help the average individual realize that you can reach financial freedom in 10 years or less, make work completely optional, even if you're not starting from the best position. That's what I did. I started at 40, retired at 52 after 12 years of investing. I started as a single parent with 3 kids and a lot of bad debt that I didn't know about until the divorce, after getting laid off from law enforcement and changing jobs and starting at $17 an hour as a CDL instructor. So it wasn't a good position, reached financial freedom in 12 years. And these are 3 of the mistakes that I hear other investors make, and sometimes I hear some of my friends make. The first one is, if you invest in real estate, I want you to understand that if you're doing the math right, so that means you could be doing the math wrong. We don't practice the math until we get it right. We practice the math until we can't get it wrong. But if you're doing the math right, I want you to understand that expenses do not impact cash flow. And I'll hear my friends say things like, if you have a rental, and these are round numbers, and you make $100 a month in profit, and you have a water heater that goes out and it costs you $1,000 to replace it, that you lost 10 months worth of income. Seems to make sense, right? You're making $100 a month. It would take 10 months to make the $100 each month add up to $1,000 that it cost you to get rid of to replace that water heater. But that's not how we run the math on real estate. If you have a rental and you have $1,000 a month coming in rent, so your rent is $1,000, that's not all profit, right? You have a mortgage, principal, interest, taxes, insurance. Even if you bought it all cash, you have taxes and insurance. So you're not going to make $1,000 in profit. So we take out the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. But when we're running the math on a rental, we also take out, for me personally, I take out 15%, but we set aside money for repairs, maintenance, and vacancy. So on $1,000 of rent, I would set aside 15%, meaning $150 is getting set aside for repairs, maintenance, and vacancy. That's 15% of $1,000. You have the mortgage, you have the money set aside. What's left is profit. So if somebody has a rental and they say, I make $100 a month in cash flow is after we set aside for repairs, maintenance, and vacancy. It means the first year that you had a rental you were making $100 in profit, you were setting aside $150 for repairs, maintenance, and vacancy, you were paying the mortgage, part of that is principal pay down. In a year, $150 a month means you have set aside $1,800 for repairs, maintenance, and vacancy. So when the water heater goes out, if it goes out in that first year, it's going to really feel like it was your money being taken. If you own it for a year and then the water heater goes out, you set aside $1,800 and it cost you $1,000, meaning you made $100 a month. You got your $1,200 in profit in that year. You actually made another $800 if you only had the water heater go out. And so here's the quick rundown on what it looks like for my personal portfolio, right? A little over $35,000 a month in rent coming in on 18 rental units, even though I live in one, so there's 17 rented out. I set aside 15%, which is a little more than $5,000 a month. Then I have about $9,000 in mortgages, so leaves me $21,000 in cash flow. So if I have, in my worst year, so far, I spent $36,000 on repairs, maintenance, and vacancy. This was a year where I did a roof and replaced a septic system and had some other maintenance items. It was $36,000. But every year, I'm setting aside $5,000 a month, a little more than that. So it's a little over $60,000 a year being set aside for repairs, maintenance, and vacancy. So even in the year where I replaced a roof, replaced a septic system, had other things, I still made more than my 21,000 a month because I'm setting aside for those costs. So when somebody says you have an expense, you lose your cash flow, that person is running their math wrong. The second thing I don't want you to make the mistake of is, and this is something I heard on BiggerPockets a lot, and I'm an avid BiggerPockets listener. I actually just did another interview, got to meet and hang out this time with Dave Myers. It was my first time interacting with him. I watch him all the time, so it was kind of cool. Apparently, he just doesn't live too far from me now. But in the BiggerPockets sphere, Brandon Turner kind of coined the phrase. At least that was where I heard it the first time. It might have been Robert Kiyosaki, because Kiyosaki talks about 3 greenhouses, 1 red hotel. But Brandon Turner talked about the stack. Now, I get the stack of my goal was I bought a duplex after 2 years of saving, then I bought another duplex 2 years later, and then so I'm stacking my properties, right? But that's not what they mean by stack. What they were talking about is you buy 2 or 3 houses or 2 or 3 small multifamily duplex or triplex, and then you sell them and you buy a 10 unit. And you do it a couple of times, you take your 10 units and you sell them and you buy a 40 unit. So you're stacking using 1031 exchanges to get into bigger and bigger properties. Contrary to popular belief, bigger isn't always better. As a defensive tactics instructor, I can tell you that. I have yet to lose a physical altercation to somebody taller than me, but I have had my rear end handed to me by people shorter than me. So bigger isn't always better, especially in real estate. I specifically target 30-year fixed rate debt. I don't want adjustable rate loans. I don't want loan reevaluation periods. I don't want balloon payments. I don't want a ratio that I have to maintain. I want to fire and forget a mortgage and never think about it again unless I'm watching interest rates and they go down far enough to make it make sense to refinance. But there's never a forced moment for my debt to blow up in my face in the future. And if you go from duplex, 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 sell them all, buy a 10plex, do it a couple times, get a 30 or 40 unit, most times you end up in the problem that people are having today, where they have adjustable rate. And if you got in on a syndication or a large apartment complex in 2020 or 2021, and you purchased it with 4% interest rate, and now it's 9% for commercial loans, 8%, so it's doubled your rates, your lender can come to you and say, you don't meet our ratio. You either have to sell the property, refinance the property, which you don't have the net operating income to do at the current interest rates, or you have to write them a check for several $100,000. So don't fall into the trap of the stack. Grow at a pace that meets your goals. If your goal is bigger in number counts, all it means anything to you, and you don't care about safety and security in your future, sure, go for the stack. It's not what I was looking for. I was looking for financial freedom and making work optional in 10 years or less. That comes from financial stability as much as financial growth. And the third thing, and the thing that comes from the thing a tenant said to me that was the funniest thing I've ever heard from a tenant, and I've heard some good stuff, often in front of law enforcement. But I was signing a lease with a tenant, and during the lease signing, the tenant said, "Thank you for being a landlord. I would never want to be a landlord. My uncle had 14 rentals, and it was so much work, he had to quit his job." That is what she said to me. The goal when people buy rentals, many times, is to make work optional. So the mistake, though, that could happen, and I'm not implying or inferring whatever her uncle did, never met them, never had another conversation about that person, but you have to be very careful if you're investing in real estate to not turn real estate into your job. I didn't buy rentals to replace my W-2. I invested in rentals to put my money to work so I wouldn't have to work for money. There's a big difference. So I have a friend, the lumberjack landlord, 140 plus units, manages teams, manages self-managed, has his wife handle listings. Now he's hired somebody and pays them to do lease signings. So he is, I want to say, offloading, outsourcing some of the jobs. Getting the amount of time he spends on his real estate down to a few hours a month will be a big challenge. So if you're investing in real estate, I want you to determine how much time you plan on spending working on your portfolio, working in your portfolio, because doing it all yourself is a huge mistake that a lot of people do. If a tenant calls and says, there's an issue, this cabinet door is broken, or this fan squeaks, or this screen needs replacing, whatever it is, you could save a couple $100 and drive to the property. You can do a simple repair yourself. You can buy the tools. You can learn the stuff I did in the beginning. I actually worked next to my handyman to learn some of these things I didn't know. How do you build a deck? And Kent asked me recently, how do you make a deck where you don't have wood touching dirt? Because insurance won't like that. But if you continue to do those things yourself, I want you to think of your portfolio this way. Treat your properties like you have 100 and your tenants like you only have one. So if you treat your tenants like you only have one, they're going to feel important. And if they feel important, they're more likely to be happy. Happy tenants don't trash your property. Happy tenants don't leave. However, if you had 100 properties, would you be the one going out to do the fence repair or replace a screen? The amount of time, energy, and effort it would take to do that would make it a job. And the more it's like a job, the less likely you would be to add rental units. And I'm not saying you need to add a bunch, but you need to add enough, because my goal wasn't a huge rental portfolio. My actual goal was the right amount of cash flow from the least amount of units. The least amount of units would be zero. That's not the right amount of cash flow. So for me, it came out to be, when I retired, I had 16 units. I made a little bit less because I've added a duplex since then, and I've used the binder strategy since then and increased my rents by $3,330 a month. Because rent control was talked about in my state. Yeah, that made me another $40,000 a year. But these are three mistakes that are pretty common. Your expenses shouldn't impact cash flow. Don't fall into the trap of bigger is better, because the debt structure gets worse and worse the bigger your portfolio gets outside of those 4 units or less type of properties. And don't turn it into a job. I'm not an entrepreneur. I didn't invest to make it a job. I invested so I wouldn't need a job. And now it takes about 2 hours a month to manage 18 rental units. And to me, that's a lot better. Some people can fight me on it and say it's not retirement because I'm doing something. If you invest all in stocks, you're probably going to spend at least 2 hours a month looking at your charts to figure out what your allocation should be and how your buckets should go. So I haven't found an investing strategy that gives us that iron lung passive income that people want, where you can lay in bed and not ever move or have to think and money comes in the door. That's not what we want. It's not what I want. That might be what some people want. But it's possible for you to make work optional. And these are 3 traps that you can fall into. That will be a video that I release on its own. Sorry for the double intro at the beginning if you were there for that. The rest of this live stream will be dedicated to answering your questions. I will look at the chat. I will go through and I want to answer all of the questions, even the rude ones, which do tend to come sometimes on my short live streams. Tonight, there is a members only live stream at 6 o'clock because there won't be one next week. Next week, I will be in Vegas at a show at the time that it would be a time to do the members only. Next week is the One Rental at a Time event at the Center for the Blind in Las Vegas. I think ticket sales are closed. You can buy virtual tickets still at the One Rental at a Time website. I will be there from Tuesday to Monday. Wednesday night and Thursday night, we're having a midnight Denny's meetup. I gave the address to Jared, and I think he put it in the school community. I'll post it. I'll pin a comment in the chat below after this video, in case you want to meet up at Denny's. In our members only tonight, we will be looking at deals. I believe Sam has a deal for us to look at, so looking forward to that. I see there's a Dion wannabe in the chat. Me too. It's funny. I just did that interview with BiggerPockets, and I don't know if they're going to, because they edit a lot and they chop some stuff out. But they were we talked about 10, didn't make it all 10, but we got 10 Dionisms, things that I do backwards. And I want to be like Dion in that video. Cody Davis with a super chat jumping off here. Debt does get better with bigger loans, 10 million plus. Bigger loans, yes. So I guess the stack, if you get to a certain point, sure, there's still a net operating income. There's still loan revaluation periods. There's still the stories you hear about interest rate changes and like the place in Texas that went for like 139 million, resold for 70 something million. That all the investors lost their money. And even in that case, the lender took a haircut. Uh, there there are ways to do it, Cody, and you have the examples. We should do another video on your debt structure. But there's a lot of people who just throw money at syndications and don't expect the debt structure to blow up in their face. And some of that money came from 1031s or money that they sold and reinvested. And so they lost a good asset to put money in a riskier asset. Not my goal. Remember, you can't drink all day unless you start early. Howdy, Frank, Wayne, Anna Kay, Dennis. Anna, good to see you. We had a good Tacoma FI meetup last night. It was not the best weather, so it wasn't a big meetup, but it was good. There was some good conversations there. We talked about Kent's property that he is under contract for. He's under contract on a triplex in one of the markets where I said cash to rent ratios make sense, where I was finding deals. He found one. I believe it's going to be a house hack. It can't happen till it does. One of my things I like to say, Cody, is statistics are meaningless until an event happens to you. Jason, howdy. Love hearing about mistakes in the hopes I don't make them. Yes, that's kind of why I make the mistakes videos is here's things I've done. Try not to do these. Uh, there's the quote, a smart person learns from their mistakes, a genius learns from someone else's mistakes. And that's one of the best things about YouTube University is a lot of us don't come on here and go, look, this is how easy it is. This is how everything always works out. We come on here and you go, when I started, I rented to a friend without a lease. Look how it blew up in my face. Here's how much money I lost that year. Like these are the mistakes we make, hoping people won't make them. Brian, Tigre, howdy. Buzztune, Mikey, good to see you. Laura, howdy. Robert, howdy. How much landlording time have you spent since last week? I did a lease signing since last week. What did I do? So I made the lease signing, screened some tenants, had some emails back and forth. About an hour and a half since last week. I would say I could count the travel time to the lease signing, but it was next to my son's, and I was going there to see him anyway. So I'm not going to count that. Although on the tax form, that is recorded mileage. So hour and a half since last week. That's a big week. That's way more than I usually do. But a tenant turnover tends to be when I have the 4 or 5 hour month. And the rest of the months go back down to 30 minutes. Matthew, just off work, caught the live. Awesome. Good to see you here. Howdy. Alantino. Howdy. How are you doing? Jason, replacing a water heater tomorrow. 2000. It's a 75 gallon, 12-year warranty. 75 gallon, good size. 2000. Is that the handyman picks it up, takes it, hauls away the old one? It could be location dependent. Hopefully you got a couple quotes because I've had most of my quotes 2000 to 2400, and then I find somebody for like $800. I buy the water heater, they put it in, so it ends up being about $1,500. 2000 sounds reasonable, especially if they're doing the pick it up, haul away work. Thanks, Valentino. That's a good compliment. I appreciate it. Aloha, Mark. Good to see you. Brian, do you save that 15% every year, or do you eventually build up enough of a cushion that you do something different with the money? That is a great question. And I have several videos on my channel called How Much in Reserves. I tend to do one every couple of years, kind of like an update on here's what I'm doing, but here's the breakdown. Cliff Notes version. When I had 7 units or less, I was saving 15%. That's consistently never going to change. I will always have 15% set aside for repairs, maintenance, and vacancy. When I had 7 units or less, my reserves were $10,000. That would handle an eviction. That would handle a roof, maybe on the smaller ones. Yeah, because I didn't have a fourplex yet. The duplexes in our house, it would have. You know, to handle a couple of issues. But when I got above 7 units, 10,000 is not enough. So in that case, what I would do is I would save the 15% until it hit 10,000. Then the 15% would go into the investing fund, never to the life expenses. So a capped out reserve and the 15% being set aside could make the next investment happen a little sooner. But if all of a sudden I was spending the 15% and below my reserves and I had to refill the reserves, I don't have to give up quality of life to refill the reserves. The investing then just takes longer. When my portfolio grew above 7 units, 10,000 wasn't enough because Murphy's fourth corollary, if a sequence of events can go wrong, they will, and in the worst possible order. Figured more things can go wrong, so I increased it to $30,000. So then the 15% accrued until it hit 30,000. Above 30,000, the money was going to the next investment, not to me, but to the next investment purchase. When I retired and I lost the safety that comes from the drug that kills our dreams, the paycheck, I increased it to 50,000. So my reserves is $50,000 that just doesn't get touched except for emergency expenses. Most expenses on the rentals get handled from cash flow, but the reserves is 50,000. The 15% above that goes into the next investing fund. So that's why I say right now, the breakdown is 35,000 gross rents. Like I said, a little more than 5,000 being set aside, 9,000 going to mortgages, 21,000 is mine. There's that 5,000 getting set aside. Yes, there's the 50,000 to cover expenses. And if there was ever a year where it went above the 60,000 that I'm setting aside, I'm sure it could happen someday. But the money that isn't used doesn't make my 21,000 that's mine bigger, right? It just makes the extra money that's piling up for the next investment happen faster. So I don't like expenses, but I do like that it's the tenant's money paying for it. Matt, the lumberjack landlord, will say it's my money because it would buy my next investment faster. But I have the discipline to know the 50,000 and that 15%, so every asset will stand on its own, could be set aside at all times, and will eventually add properties. Chris, howdy. Snowy, cold, Humboldt County, California. Nice, snowy and cold here too. It was nice and icy on my way home from the meetup last night. I drove by. I wish I could have recorded it. There was 10 or more fire trucks, ambulances, first responder vehicles on the freeway, and I only saw like 2 cars that were involved in a wreck. I don't know how they got so many responder vehicles there, but it was a good quarter mile stretched out, all those vehicles on the side with their lights going. Stephen, howdy. Thank you for the help on my rental information. I have someone moving in April. Awesome. Gotta love that. April. Wait. I have someone moving in April, not moving in April. I was going to say, okay, so you have a tenant plan and they're that's a long time to hold a rental, but if they're moving in April, nice. As much as my portfolio is designed to limit tenant turnover to make it easier for me because I was working and raising 3 kids, right? I call myself lazy, but it had to be as easy as possible. It's never going to be easy, but it had to be easy as possible, or I wouldn't have continued to add, right? So I came up with strategies to make it easier. And one of those strategies was low tenant turnover. So I want properties that help limit tenant turnover. I want the binder strategy, where I keep my rents, the upgrades that I do. Everything is designed to keep a tenant in place as long as possible. But that doesn't mean I don't like tenant turnover, right? When a tenant leaves, the last tenant, I think, what was their rent? 1,500, had just gone to 1,760 after the binder, and they moved out and bought a place, and it rented for 2,100. So it's a 400 and almost $400 increase by having a tenant turnover. And that tenant was there. They were there when I bought the property. They lived in the property for 5 years and then moved. And every month, based on their rent, I forget the exact amount that was being set aside, but it was about 13,000. I did the math with the lumberjack landlord and Zuber in some video. About 13,000 was being set aside for repair. I didn't come nowhere near 13,000 in repairs for the turnover. It was, I think, just under 8 when it was all said and done. Do not hire a painter to paint ever. And if there's painters watching, you can be irritated. You don't want to hear that. Hire a handyman to paint. and it's a fraction of the cost. I can't tell the difference. And I had one painter, well, that guy's going to use probably 3 more gallons of paint than I would. Okay, you cost $3,000 more than he does. Is 3 gallons of paint worth $3,000? Valentino sounds like, oh, my chat moved. Sounds like that lady's uncle wasn't doing too bad in the big picture. No, I guarantee it wasn't so much work they quit their job. It was the cash flow finally got to be enough to quit their job. But you don't go to your niece and say, look how stupid rich I am. I have a ton of money, because then they just borrow it. Dark Spring, howdy. Just realized I had financial independence today. I was sure had not telling my boss I'm retiring. Good looking. I'm out. Yeah. Congratulations. Um, it's an interesting time when you start telling people that your work became optional. As soon as the company I worked at, the owners realized I was making more money off my rentals than I was being paid, my compensation went up. A lot of people say, oh, I don't want my company to know I'm investing because they'll think I'm going to leave and I'll get passed for a promotion or whatever. No, they were thinking, how can we keep this person? Which worked in my favor. Not enough, right? Time freedom won out, but I did stay for a couple more years. Weirdly making more money in those 2 years than pretty much the rest of my career, and then still walking away. So congratulations. It's a good time. Mark, sorry about the rude ones. Nice. Good. Sound snags, 10 million. Exactly. Chris, howdy. Stephen, still working 712s, but I'm here to grab some knowledge. It will pay off. It will be worth it. Cody, howdy. REI Jared, howdy. All Night Hider. And Jared, I don't know if you guys are aware, but there's a members meetup tonight at 6 o'clock. Looking, I think, at Sam's deal. Jason, yes, everything included. I am buying the water heater from Home Depot. They are picking up and installing, also taking old one away. Yeah, yeah, sounds about good. Sounds good. 12-year warranty for me would work depending on the placement of the water heater. So even with the 12-year warranties, I'll do 8 years if it's interior. So no matter how long the warranty is, because it covers the water heater, often doesn't cover any damages. If it's interior, like in a closet, where if it does start a rupture and a leak, it's going to hit flooring and joists, I'll do 8-year replacement. And if it's in the garage, like on cement, I say I'll do 12-year replacement, but I generally do when it quits, when there's a problem, replacements. And that got me when I was in Portugal a couple of years ago. I think I had three. It was either 3 water heaters and 4 refrigerators, or 4 refrigerators and 3 water heaters all at the same time. Temperature change can affect things like that. It's like when people say, why are all these headlights out? It's because there's a massive temperature change in your area. Right. I am traveling home. We'll be back in the chat semi soon. Nice. Jason. Use 6,000 for unit fix up, tubs, floors, and paint. Still positive 6K without touching the cash flow. Love it. That's the point. The cash flow is in addition to the money that you're setting aside for repairs, maintenance, and vacancy. Now, but when you're first starting, those first like months where you haven't started to build the reserves, so you have the water heater go out in the first month, it's out of your check, your checking account. Feels like it's your money. You use the 15% from the rents to repay yourself. Please bruise the like button, show the algo what's up. That would be much appreciated. Jack, howdy, good to see you here. See your website in here being awesome like always. Jack, sorry everyone, not website. Curtis, if 100% financial freedom is your goal by year 10, what percentage should I increase yearly? Nope. I know cash flow snowballs, and how do I track if I'm on pace? It will hockey stick. So it's not quite snowball. Snowball is the term I used with the income snowball because the income starts coming in differently. But the cash flow really, when you got your first one, when you hit the decade mark, that means you'll have that one for 10 years. You got your next one a year later, that triplex that you're house hacking now, you will have that one for 9 years, right? In 10 years or 9 years of owning a property, what opportunities were there to refinance or raise insurance deductibles or increase rents or whatever that can happen that can increase the cash flow from that property over a decade? Then you have the one that you added at 5 years and 7 years and 8 years and 9 years, right? But you probably acquire more properties quicker towards the end because you have the increased cash flow to do it. The struggle comes in at about that 5 or 6 year mark. So you're 2 or 3 years in now. At the 5 or 6 year mark, Curtis, you're going to start to feel, I've worked hard. I've put in 5 years. I have some cash flow. Should I drive a car that would make me not get accepted as a tenant if I showed up in it? Or should I go get myself that fancy car? I started at 8 years, maybe a little early. I think it was a good time. About 8 years, I started doing that. I'm going to buy stupid things with some money. But the year hockey stick growth, it's that last part of the decade. That's why some people say, well, you did it in 10. Can I do it sooner? Well, there are some levers that you can pull to shorten the handle of the hockey stick, but the massive growth still doesn't happen until several things happen. Different income sources, so different properties, different opportunities to increase rents, years passing on each property. To know if you're on, so here's what I did. I made a YouTube channel and I grew it large enough to get on the radar of people like Lumberjack Landlord and Michael Zuber from One Rental at a Time. And then I said, let's do a video where we do a portfolio review. And this was a few months before I retired. I'll go, what would you do different? Now, the idea was I was looking for fresh eyes that aren't me with experience to look at my portfolio and not having to pay $3,000 for a financial advisor who probably knows nothing about real estate to come in and look at my rentals, right? But they tore it apart. They looked at my entire portfolio, and the idea was, I was on the cusp of I'm probably going to retire sometime between tomorrow and 3 years from now. I started putting a time on it. Tomorrow and 3 years from now. Set it for 6 months probably, and then it was tomorrow all of a sudden. But if they looked at the portfolio and they said, "Oh, your cash flow is just terrible," or your debt structure is really bad, or you're in a market that's going to fall apart. If they pointed out something that I couldn't see, then I could have sat back and looked at that data. But they looked at my entire portfolio, and Lumberjack Landlord said, you hurt my brain with your dead equity. So my equity could perform better. That doesn't impact my cash flow, doesn't impact my sustainability, doesn't impact my stabilization of my portfolio. It just could perform better. And then they said at the time I had a paid off rental. Interest rates were low. I could have refinanced out 50% loan to value. It's a low interest rate to have money to deploy for the next deal. So they pointed out two things. Dead equity wasn't performing as well as it could, and a cash out refinance on the paid off property would get me the best interest rate, deployable cash. And so I looked at their recommendation, and neither one of those suggestions would make my retirement better. Have you had someone look at your portfolio, Curtis, and you literally go, here's my mortgages, this is my insurance, this is my taxes, this is how long I've owned the property, these are my existing leases, this is how many tenants I have, this is what their rents are at, here's what I'm setting aside for repairs, maintenance, and vacancy, this is what my cash flow is. Have you sat down with another investor, maybe like on a Zoom call, broken out your portfolio to have them go and point out something that I couldn't think of right now because I'm not looking at your portfolio? That's how you would know you're on track. It's exactly the same when somebody goes, I want to have a deck built and I got a quote for $7,000. Is that a good price? Nobody knows. Nobody can answer that question. Is it a 4 foot by 5 foot deck? Right? Is it 20 by 50? Did you get three quotes from the people who actually do the work and understand the materials and understand the amount of work involved to compare at least those three quotes to figure out what a fair price might be? Until you have multiple eyes looking at your portfolio, you won't know if it's on track or not. Christine, howdy. Hired a painter. Lesson learned. Yeah. Uh, I I don't think I've ever hired a painter, But I learned the lesson two different ways. One, in the beginning, in the beginning, in a world, I would paint myself. It's the easiest thing that we do as landlords. And here's the sentence that changed painting for me forever. And so I've used this to teach handymen that didn't quite get the concept. When you paint a wall, there's a painted wall in here. Literally, this is a painted wall from after I moved in. When the handyman paints it, or your friend who needs money that day, hire him to paint. You watch him for a minute. Couple tricks. One, you make sure your nap is thick enough. You don't want a half inch. You don't want 3/8. You want 3/4 nap. It's going to use more paint. Who cares? They're not painting the wall. They're coating it. They're sealing it. You teach the person who's painting that the paint is like a neoprene, rubbery plastic. You're smashing it into the wall with pressure to spread it around to seal the wall. And once the painter, handyman, non-painter gets that point, I've never had somebody look at a wall and tell it was a professional job or a handyman that did it. And the handyman will basically charge you a day's labor, $400 to $800, depending on what other jobs they could be doing and what that handyman's skill level is at. Versus a painting crew who's thinking, I've got the taping, the plastic, the sprayer, the prep, the how many people in my crew, and it'll be $3,000 to $5,000 to do the painting, and you buy the paint to paint the inside of a place. Versus $400 to $800, maybe $800 to $1,600 if it's a huge place with a lot of detail. They don't have to really put up plastic because I don't want handymen that are going to use a sprayer. Sprayers go through way more paint. I want rolled on paint. I don't have 30 apartment complexes. I have 1, 2, or 3 bedroom place, and it takes them a day or two. One coat, satin finished, I probably have the name of the type of paint. Go to Sherwin-Williams, get a contractor's account. You get 30% off or more for all the paint you buy. It's cheaper. Hiring a painter will always cost you 3 or 4 times what hiring a handyman to do the painting would be. In the beginning, for me, it was just the paint and a weekend. Then I remembered how lazy I am, and I'm like, I ain't doing that anymore. So find handymen that don't mind painting. My handymen have been happy. They're like, nobody hires me to paint. They won't let me to do it. And I'm like, yeah, if it ain't good, we're going to renegotiate your pay or you're going to redo it. And they're open to what I want them to do for painting. And then they understand they're sealing the paint in, sealing the wall with paint. Gio, what is the tax rate on income from a rental? That is a great question. Welcome to the channel. It's great to see you here. Hopefully I got your question before you left, because sometimes I fall behind in questions because I try to answer them all in detail. Hopefully you see the value there. The tax rate on rental properties is exactly the same as your tax rate on your W-2 income. It is income. Here's the difference. When you work at a job, so I was working at a CDL school, and in the last couple of years, I was running the CDL school, making pretty good money. So I paid a ton in taxes. Taxes suck. Let's say you make $100,000. The $100,000, your company says you're going to make $100,000. The government looks at your graduated tax rate, right? So up to 10,000, it's 10%, 12%, 24%, right? The next amount of money gets taxed more. It's called a graduated tax system. Your rentals are exactly the same. It's income. So the government takes their taxes, you get your paycheck, minus medical insurance, union dues, whatever, Social Security, whatever they're going to take the money out, right? So the government takes theirs, you get yours. With a rental property, and it's almost like a business. As a business, you get paid, you then have expenses. So I get paid my rents that come in, then I have expenses. I pay the taxes for the property. I pay the insurance for the property. I get to write off the interest that I'm going to pay on the mortgage. So that's the interest write-off. I don't get to write off the principal because that's still technically my money, that's income, but I'm writing those things off. So I get the money, I take out my expenses, and if you ran a business, then the government takes their portion of what's left. But here's how real estate works. Because Congress is full of people who own real estate that keep making laws that benefit people who own real estate. This is why it's amazing. I still haven't paid money in rental income tax. And Jared does because he makes more money on fewer properties. I have what's called levered assets. So if I buy a duplex, I put $100,000 down, I own a $400,000 property. So my $100,000 down, if I make a 10% cash on cash return, I'm going to make $10,000 in profit from that property. That's basically how that works, right? So I'm going to make $10,000, but I get to depreciate, which is, this is the fourth most beautiful word in the English language, depreciation. I get to go to the government and say, my properties have gone up in value about $600,000, right? But they're a year older. So I want to take, they take 27 and a half years, the value of all the buildings on your properties. They divide it up over that. Every year you get to take off one of those, the value off of your taxes. So last year I make 240-ish thousand dollars doing taxes soon. I think I'm gonna do them next week, which is gonna be landlording time. Ugh. I'm probably gonna be carrying forward a loss this year, $8,000, over $200,000 in profit, but because I'm depreciating over $6 million in properties because of leverage, I don't pay any taxes. So what's the tax rate on rentals? The same as your job, but the tax structure is better. We get write-offs. So what was the most recent write-off? I have a tenant turnover. I pay for flooring. It's a write-off. I pay the handyman to paint. It's a write-off. I buy the paint. It's a write-off. So I have these expenses. I get to write those off. But I also get to depreciate the properties. Now, if you go out and you buy properties all cash, you're going to get rents. You're not going to have enough to depreciate. You're going to pay taxes, which is okay. You make so much money, you had to pay taxes. I don't mind paying taxes. But because I'm using levered assets, still not paying property taxes. Well, income taxes on rentals. There's property tax, which my tenants pay out of the rent. I'm okay with that. Let's start a weekly dive time count for Dion. There you go. This guy out paddleboarding today. I was wondering if it was Kris, because he seems like the kind of guy that would paddleboard, go out there and chip the ice to put the paddleboard on the water. I tend to usually, in the Pacific Northwest, I want 45 degrees or warmer air temperature to dive. And I know the water is not affected by the air so much, but getting in and out sucks when it's that cold. And I'm lazy. The travel diving is way more time. Jason, cement basement temperature control, no damage if it blows. Yeah, there you go. Didn't want to risk it going well in Vegas. It was starting to drip. It's 18 years old. Yep, time to do it. Got your money's worth out of it. Pewmeister, howdy. How much did you keep in reserves for that first 5 to 6 years? I'm 3 years in, single family, 10K for those first, it was 10 until I passed 7 units. Wondering how much I should keep in reserves while taking on the next rental property. So it was 10 for me, but that was between 2013, 2018. Then I increased it. Inflation, maybe it's more. Maybe it's 15,000 now. Maybe 15,000 would be comfortable. Your lenders might also have an equation of 4% of the gross value of your properties. Weird math. Other ones might go, your total principal, interest, and taxes and insurance, your PITI, not your PITI because it doesn't have an E, but your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance for all of your properties times 3. So you have to have 3 months worth of payments. That's what your lenders are often going to require. Now they will look at some other things like a reserve. They'll look at a stock portfolio or a retirement account. Basically, they'll say 50% of that value can count as your reserves. I didn't do that except for one time I did it with a lender, because there was one time I did something really stupid. I went down to about $200 in my bank account. Never do that. Not in the beginning. Don't compare. And this was my year 8. Don't compare year 8 to year 1. Thank you, Brian. I like the jacket. It's funny, the jacket matches the tattoo. The nerds will get the point. Yeah, so Pewmeister, it was 3 times all of your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance for those first few years. Then I raised it to 30. I don't even know what the math would have worked out on that. And now it's 50. And it's not 10 per unit, 30 per unit. It was 10,000 total, 30,000 total, 50,000 total. Everything above that should be put to work to make more money. Stephen, I missed tonight's meetup tonight at 7. That's 9 p.m. for me. Have to hit the bed. Can you record it? So the members meetings tonight, it's a members meeting. They will all be recorded. This one will not be released like last week's. Last week I put the members meeting. I let everybody know. We put it out on the regular channel so people could see what we do in a members meetup. And we look at a deal. But yeah, tonight's will be recorded. It's the course calls. We'll probably be doing course calls through the month of March. Most of those aren't recorded, so we can talk about the gray area sketchy stuff that we can't put on YouTube. Jared, funny you mentioned the vehicle. An investor buddy of mine drives an old truck for showings instead of his nice car. He says renters don't want to rent from someone they think is loaded. They don't want to rent from somebody they think they're loading. Smart. It's kind of different. A real estate agent might want to drive a nice car so it shows success. People want to work with somebody who's successful. But as a landlord, showing your wealth, not the smartest thing. The jacket. Yep, it is called the Winchester because I have the Mark of Cain tattoo. I'm a nerd. The D&D map should tell you. No one should be shocked by anything that I say about nerdiness. Brian, Dividend Dave, howdy, good to see you. I'm under contract for a new property. Thanks, Mark, the financial firefighter. Awesome. 3 of 4 water heaters are from 2007. Do I proactively replace? I personally would. And if you're under contract, I might negotiate for a seller concession. They replace them. They adjust the price. They do a seller's credit. If they don't, it doesn't blow up the deal. But I'd probably proactively, 2007, you're talking, yeah, I do 8 and 12-year replacements. Somebody is texting me. Is it, your sound is not working? Oh, good. Telling me he's going to pay his rent. Don't screaming eagle dookie. It's the 4th. Dingus. Beth, if you get this, I'm watching and available to join. Absolutely. Thank you for texting me. When did you send that? Hopefully. Oh, it's a minute ago. I didn't even let it go too long. Absolutely. Let me get an invitation sent here because we have somebody in the comments who's smarter than me and knows more stuff. And it's going to take me a second here while I send the secret code. And it's funny because every time I search for your email, I put in Beth, and that's not how it shows up. Sent. Okay. And then, yeah, so I would replace the water heaters, and then I would, if you come to the members meetup tonight, tell me some of the details about that deal that you're under contract. If not, email me. Put my email in the chat. I'm always curious about the deals people are getting because everybody knows it's impossible to buy properties now. Like when Kent came to the local meetup last night, and he talked about the deal that he's under contract. Everybody had to tell him he was a liar because it's not possible. Can't do it. He's actually having really good luck with the lenders that he got through Curtis. So if you live in the Pacific Northwest, Curtis has contact for good lenders. Beth Traverso, howdy. Good to see you. Hopefully you got that invite. Jim, howdy. Peace of mind, at least have one purchased and ready to go in. Oh, there you go. Yeah, smart. Yeah, depending on your storage distance to the place, purchased and ready to go in, inspected. I mean, if there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, you don't have to worry about it right away. Maybe go a couple of months or something, but put it on the to-do list. I was buying a property one time, and it was built in 1921. It's one of my, I have 2 older properties like that. The other one's 1939. The rest are all 1980 or newer. And older than 2000 because I don't want to own anything newer than that. But somebody said, why would you buy something so old? And I'm like, it's not like it falls over when you buy it. Like it's been there for a century. Actually, well, almost a century when I bought it. That means it's pretty tested. And yeah, I'm going to have a home inspection done. I'm looking for when updates were done. And is it knob and tube wiring? Is it cast iron pipes? Is it, whatever. Age of building doesn't matter to me as much, especially depending on where you're at. Lumberjack Landlord is on the East Coast. And I don't think he owns anything that's less than 100 years old. And Beth, anytime you want to, you are willing to jump in. I sent that. Let me know if you got it. I would, yep. Hey, Jared, glad to see you again, Beth. Aloha, Brian. Good evening, everyone. Freedom Works. Howdy, Liz. What do you think about acquiring rental by using a hard money loan for value add, then refi into DSCR loan and keeping 20 to 25% equity as down payment instead of doing cash out refi? Is this just as risky as Burr? It is sounds riskier. So hard money loan has a timeline. How much experience do you have with rehab timeline, permit requests, cost of materials, after repair value, all of those things? There's so much risk there that if you've been doing it for 10 years and you're adjusting your Burr strategy, sure. I wouldn't. I wouldn't personally do that. Actually, howdy, Beth.
Hello.
Liz, I just did an interview with David Myers from BiggerPockets, and one of the things that I talked about was how I don't believe in value add. I don't like it. I don't want to do it. I want to buy a property that makes sense. You can do value add in the future, but I don't like the Burr method. I don't like doing rehabs. I don't like uh, the risks involved with you get the hard money loan and then you want to refi into a DSCR loan later. What if DSCR rates go up to 10 or 12? It's entirely possible. Then what happens to your hard money loan? If you have a big enough portfolio, you'll hear about people doing it, and it's totally fine because if it blows up in their face, they write a check or they do a cash out refinance on something else and solve the problem. But if you're starting out in growth mode, it's extremely risky. Hey, Beth, how are you? Are you getting excited? We're getting closer to next week.
I'm super excited. I talked to Mike Zuber earlier today and got plans. I'm coming in on the 13th. Hope to see some of you all there. I know I'll see you. So you're getting there a week early, is that what I heard? Or at least a few days early.
Just a few days. I think I get there on the 11th. Staying at Trump Tower, of course, gotta show my support. And just lost 5 subscribers. But um, going to a show, and then I think Mike and some other people show up on Wednesday. And then we have the Wednesday night meetup, Thursday night meetup, and the event on the weekend.
For all you night owls. I haven't stayed up, I don't know. I haven't been out of the house at midnight and I don't know how many years. So,
So I had an interview with I think Christian from Cody and Christian multifamily
yeah.
at like 1 in the afternoon the other day, and I was like, "Yep, I should go to bed by 7 a.m. I should like make sure I get sleep before I have an interview with him." So I don't know if I'm a night owl. It's an anytime owl right now.
Well, that's the thing about being financially free and retired. You can make whatever sleep schedule fits your lifestyle the best, right? I'm
It
still dealing with getting kids to school in the morning, so I'm up at 6 at the latest, no matter what, Monday through Friday. So, that's
well
why
enjoy those years because
I do.
they do end, and when they
Yeah.
do end, you I didn't I honestly don't think I enjoyed them during the time because I was working 14, 15-hour days
Yeah.
and then doing volunteer stuff at the kids' schools and everything. I enjoy the memories. I enjoy the time and everything. I think at the time I was just tired. I remember, and okay, this is way too much of an overshare. There was a day I accidentally mixed up Sudafed, cold medicine. I was like going to do a presentation and I took two 24-hour pills instead of like usually just take one. And I remember thinking, this is the most awake I've been in like 10 years. I know I totally understand why people do meth now.
Yeah. Right.
And then since retiring, I haven't been tired for 10.
You don't need to. But yeah, my oldest is going to graduate this year, and I'm already feeling all the pre-loss, I guess you'd say, and she's not even moving out right away. So anyway,
But she drives though.
oh yeah,
Yeah. So now you're
very
starting to get that
independent.
autonomy of they can drive and maybe even help with
Oh
stuff. So
yeah, she drives my middle child that also goes to high school. She drives her in the morning. That was a huge thing, and I actually kind of miss the that drive in the morning and the I still try to do the picking up, and I do as much of that as I possibly can because to me, that's the most important thing. So I structure everything else in life is structured around those things first. So because it is very limited, like you point out often, like we don't have that much time with our kids. So Even the mundane everyday things are important. So, but when they're
Yep.
gone, yeah, it'll be interesting because so much of my identity, it happens to every parent, I'm sure, but your identity gets wrapped into these being a parent to these kids and, you know, thankfully I've got other stuff going on. So, I'll just have to lean into that more.
Nice. So there's
Yeah.
Liz is asking some questions, and then she sends a clarification, and it actually sounds a little bit like your story. So I want to kind of read this.
Right.
Liz was asking if they could do like a BRRRR with a hard money loan going to DSCR instead of traditional lending. But then they follow up with, I don't think I've mentioned, but I'm a realtor like you, and her husband's a contractor like you.
Right.
But I haven't done any investments quite yet, looking to start with flips this year. Thank you for amazing advice. So that kind of changes. If your husband is the contractor, how much work is the husband going to do? Because you also have that aspect of it. Um, being a realtor, I think it's really cool to see a realtor that's looking at investing because we know so many realtors who never own
Most
a.
don't. Most never
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
So I
So good
think,
job. I think that could be fantastic. You know, yeah, so much better qualified because for a lot of people, the construction is the hardest part to wrap their mind around, and it's easy to underestimate the scope and what it's going to cost and how long it's going to cost, how long it's going to take. And most people dramatically underestimate that. And if you have a professional as one of the owners, then that's going to help tremendously. Plus, you've already got the contacts and the crew, and yeah.
so there's a tax question here. And anytime taxes come up, because Geo asked about, what's the tax rate on income? Always talk to a CPA. It's like it's so convoluted that when I mentioned how amazing depreciation is, there's different types of depreciation, and I don't want to know what they are. I want to know, give the information to the CPA and let them choose which best category to put it in. But the
Right.
question,
One depreciates in what is it, 10 years or something, and the rest of it depreciates in 27 and a half.
yeah, so there's amortized and scheduled,
Yeah.
right? So you have some things are based on 15 years, some things are 27 and a half. Commercial is 39, residential is 27.
Right.
All these rules, and then you have bonus scheduled. Then you
Yeah.
have those studies that Matt the lumberjack landlord did, a cost segregation study. There's so much more to it. To where Geo, your thing is your first year where you're going to have taxes as a landlord. My very first year with thing, hire a tax pro. Don't go to H&R Block. Don't go to one of those.
No.
Find a local CPA or Bob Langworthy from Maine Beam Counters. Tell them you're from the one rental at a time community. Uh, it'll cost you a few $100s, but it's going to save you that first year of depreciation. You're going to be worried about it 5 years from now. Was that first year done right? Right. And so you want to have somebody that knows what they're doing to it.
I switched to a different CPA, an enrolled agent, a few years ago, and he looked at it like, who set up this depreciation? Like, this was wrong. You've been overpaying all this time. But, but if maybe they all say that. I don't know, whenever somebody comes in. But he made some tweaks and fixed it and saved me a bunch of money. So, things that I
Love
don't
that.
even comprehend. And the more you complicated life gets, I think my return, I don't know. I can't say how many pages, but I think it's about if I was to print it, it'd be about 3/4 of an inch thick. I don't understand any of that stuff. So, and I just got audited for 2021. And if I didn't have a great CPA and a um, great records, I mean, it was terrible enough as it was, but it could have been just a bloodbath. So,
I
thank God
always
I wasn't
pay
on my own.
I always pay the extra for mine. It's like $145 a year for some insurance. And in 2019, I was audited for 2016. And the $145 basically meant everything that came to me, I just sent to the tax guy and he handled the whole audit and came back and they found they found no errors, which meant all errors found were in my favor. So they don't ever just like, oh, we audited you and they found a mistake. Here's a check. Like your tax guy can do that, but the
Yeah.
IRS doesn't do that.
No, they won't do that. And then I basically just played it like he was like almost like my attorney, like, don't talk to me, talk to him.
Yeah, exactly.
He knows exactly how to. We did one conference call and he knew how exactly to ask me exactly the right question so that I answered it exactly the way, you don't want to say any more than you just like if you're just like we're dealing with attorneys, like you want to say just enough and you want to be honest, of course. I'm always honest. I've always been honest with that stuff, but you know, yeah, you want to make sure if they're trying to lead you into a corner, you want to make sure you don't go into that corner.
Yeah.
So,
I do a lot of depositions as an expert witness testimony provider, and it's always only answer what was asked. You don't
exactly what was
volunteer.
asked and no embellishment. And just so people know out there, they really were cracking down on cash payments between contractors. And they thought that my husband was getting paid cash for the work he did, which he was not. We do deal some with cash. It's legal to deal with cash. It was post-tax cash, and you're allowed to do that. But anyway, they thought that something had to be wrong because of that, and so they really, really kept going down that rabbit hole and kept pushing and pushing on it. Anyway, they first came back and said I owed him $75,000, and then my CPA said no, 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 and he got it down to like $3,200, and he's like, "Stop what you're doing right now, sign this form immediately," and that closes it today because it was Friday and they wanted to go home for the weekend. I'm like, okay, good. So
Nice.
anyway, that's that
Brian asked a
story in a
question on
nutshell. Hopefully,
taxes
never again.
here. Brian asked a question on taxes here. If you have different rentals, can you use write-offs against rental income, or is each write-off on a property against that property only?
I believe it's against that property only, so I keep a ledger for each property, and that's as far as I know. So the income and the expenses are for that property specifically.
Yeah, so
That if
in
I'm
the
answering the question correctly, I think that's what he's asking.
yep, it's not something I've ever asked on my spreadsheet that you get from the binder strategy for free. It's at diontalk.com. You take the binder course, which is free. In there, you can download the spreadsheet. The CPA and I put that together. Um, columns I needed and columns they needed. And one of the things they needed was which property is the expense, or which thing, because I have YouTube expenses too, is it assigned to? So there's a column saying this is where the expense was spent. And
Yeah.
then I've never thought about it. I just send it to them. They know how to expense it against the income. And then the
Yeah.
spreadsheet says the rents that came in for each property. So
And then again, like I said, my tax return's very long, but I think it boils down to like one line. It'll say like how much your income was from your rental properties. I think they distill it all, but you have to have a separate form for each property
yeah,
because it has a depreciation schedule and everything is specific to that property and the income specific to that property.
if people weren't good at like pausing videos and zooming in, I would open up one of my tax documents, and you said yours is about this thick. Mine is just a PDF, but it goes on for 70 something pages.
Yeah.
Jack, I'm looking for a square body manual Chevy S10 so I can use it for landscaping and showing rentals. Nothing says you don't have money like detoxing a manual that's not in a sports car. I think you want to make sure you're looking for an S10. I don't think they weigh enough. You want to look for a vehicle that weighs over 6,000 pounds.
Yeah, then you get the write-off.
You can
Yeah.
get the write-off with it that way, right?
But speaking of the square body, my son loves square bodies. So he's 13 years old and he would love to have a square body. And if some of those are worth money, they're collectible. So somebody might, depending on the square body, people might still think you have money.
And then there's a Dion wannabe who took back a message to make me lose sleep. Wonder forever and ever what was said. Gavin, although I have lucked out and I have some water heaters last 20 years, somebody suggests getting all four done at the same time to save money. Millennial Mike says howdy in the chat
Oh, hey.
in Vegas. We talked about you last night, Mike, at the meetup and your travels that you're doing with Vegas. Liz, I don't think I've mentioned, okay, that was where she's an agent and her husband's a contractor. Nicole, there's a deal that I'm considering. It's considered a good deal because it breaks even if I keep property management company. It's in a high appreciating area and growing area. I'm conflicted. What are your thoughts on buying a break-even property in a high appreciating area?
Well, that's a win. In my area, that's considered a win. But I would see if there's ways you can get it to be above just break even. You want to get more return. So I would say if you're open to self-management, that'd be a great way to increase your return. Um, Maybe there's ways to raise rents or do other things that you can increase your income or decrease your expenses on that property. But I'm in a high appreciation, high cost area as well. And most, if you look at average, average is horrendous, average is way negative. And so if something is break even, that's success. But I realize, for some that isn't, and that's fine. I would potentially do that, but I would want to see we're not in this to not make any cash flow. Like if you're putting money in, you need to get the cash flow out. The appreciation is good also. I think both are important, but cash flow, you got to have that. So I would look at ways to increase that. But, from straight out of the chute, if it's a break even, for me, I think that would be acceptable. Maybe also it depends on where you are in your journey too, but I would do that.
So there's a couple thoughts. The first one, Nicole, when you say you're breaking even, is that after setting aside for repairs, maintenance, and vacancy, or do you have those future expenses that are actually going to make it cost money to own that property? The second is a break-even property that you buy for free, no money out of pocket. I wouldn't be too opposed to that. It's not a good call. But what if you're investing $3 million to have a break-even property? Your out-of-pocket cost is 3 million. Now you have zero break-even, and that's a very exaggerated number. There's a
Hmm.
scale in there somewhere where you could put the money to work somewhere else better. And I just had a 1 hour call with somebody. They booked an hour call, and they live in an area where she wants to house hack in a high cost of living area, good school district, all the things that matter to her. But every deal we looked at was negative 18%, negative 16%, negative. They were all around almost 20% negative. Every deal, no matter what we looked at. So then we expanded out where the remote workers are. We went about 45 minutes out of the work center. We took out the house hacking aspect. We took the same money down that she would have been doing on the house hack in her high cost of living area. We found an area where property prices went to from 700 to $900,000 for your average place to 3 to 500,000. The rents weren't much different, and all of a sudden it was positive 6% deals 45 minutes away. Very
May I
similar.
ask where this was? I'm just curious.
This was outside of Detroit.
Okay.
So they were in Detroit, Michigan, right? So we were in Detroit, and we looked southwest, if that's how it looks on your map. And not very far, about 45 minutes out. And all of a sudden we found properties for 200 were the really bad ones, but 300 to 500,000. And the rents made positive 6%, considering repairs, maintenance, and vacancy and everything. There was positive cash flow things. So if you came to Washington, you looked in King County and you said, hey, look, I want to buy on Queen Anne, every deal you look at is going to be negative 20%, negative 25%. You're just going to lose money left and right. But you make a 5 or a 10-year appreciation play, it's probably going to make money. Who knows? I would never do that. But if you go 45 minutes outside of King County and you start hitting Port Orchard, Bremerton, uh, Graham, edge of Snohomish, the other outside edge of Snohomish, you start finding a price to rent ratio where it's positive numbers. Jared, caution with the DSCR loans because they might not be around. Also, they change all the time.
Mm. I have yet to do a DSCR loan. That might be my next one if I do it, but
I went to apply for one, my first one. I've all my loans have been conventional so far. And it was interesting. I had to grow up. They ask for a thing called a personal financial statement, which no lender has ever asked me for. They go tax returns, pay stubs, rental leases, those kind of things. But for a DSCR loan, they need to know your net worth because your net worth often has to be 50% of the loan value or 100% of the loan value. And so it was an exercise for me to learn what my net worth was doing that. And I was like, wow, that's a big number. Uh, so that personal financial statement, your net worth, some weird aspects to it. And I've seen 2 times now where conventional interest rates were higher than DSCR loans, but all other times DSCR rates were higher than conventional. Uh, Nicole also asks, what question should I ask the property management company when I interview them? What would you ask a property management company?
mm. Um, I've only ever worked with one. I don't know that I'm the best for that. We've got other people in the chat that have some good advice on this. Um, uh, I would want to know what their screening process is, and I'd want to know how they market the property. Of course, I want to know what their fees are. Want to know how they communicate, what their team is as far as handy people, etc., how they charge for that. Um, I kind of want to know how many evictions they deal with too. I think that's a kind of a failure in screening most of the time. So,
Yeah. So with the property management, I'm in the same boat. I self-manage. Long list of reasons, right? We have different goals than a property management company. It costs an owner thousands of dollars, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars to have a tenant turnover. I just had one. I probably spent, I have to do the math on it, probably around $8,000. And I had a uh, half of December and January didn't collect rent. So you total that up, I probably 10 grand or whatever in money that I didn't get. But now I have a rent increase. So $10,000 out of pocket to have a tenant turnover. If I had a property manager, they make more money if there's tenant turnover. So where's their motivation to communicate in a polite, professional way that helps maintain low tenant turnover? So you want to know their fees. I want to know their fee structure. I would only work with a property manager that has a flat rate, not a percentage of rent, like $400 or less tenant placement fee, uh, and maybe an hourly rate to sign leases or show the property or something. But I want them to hate tenant turnover as much as I do. It shouldn't be a good thing. Would want references from other investors in the area that have used them. That's what I would check. Everything else that Beth said. Is there a reason you can't self-manage? And there are some very valid ones. One, if it's at a distance, if you're out of state and very far away, I would recommend having a property manager. Two, if you wear your heart on your sleeve and don't have a backbone and would stick to a lease and hold somebody to it, and you would be like, oh, just pay your rent late, it's fine. Oh, you have extra pets, I don't care. Oh, your mom and uncle live there, I don't care. You need a property manager. If you
yeah.
can stick to a lease, you can be professional. You don't have to be rude. This lease is here to protect you, but it's also here to protect me. Uh, I prefer self-managing. Uh,
I prefer it too, honestly. If I get to a point where I have more time, that's definitely something I would take back. Um, I You had a good point where I forget exactly how you were illustrating the point, but just like say if they say it's 10%, we go, oh, well, it's 10%. But if that's half of your cash flow, then you're paying them 50% and they don't own the property and they didn't make the sacrifice and they're not paying for everything you've done. If you look at it that way, it feels more disproportionate. So,
yeah,
um,
the property manager almost always makes more than the owner until you
yeah,
really.
with none of the risk, none of the risk. And so I would definitely take that back over. I still do self-manage about half of them, but there's about another half that I do have managed, and it was mostly just a time management thing because I don't have the capacity to deal with um we get barely any phone calls as far as maintenance. So like the whole thing about people being terrified of a clogged toilet, it's just like a myth out there. Like, and it's their problem if they clog the toilet. It says in the lease, like if you need to snake that toilet, that's on you. But very little of that. But the uh the thing that's hard for me is just dealing with all the calls when I'm trying to place a tenant in the property. And so from time to time, I've done just a play the property manager I work with will just handle that part. She'll screen them, get the lease in there. She uses the rental housing association leases, which are that in Washington, those are the best ones that are written for that reflect the landlord tenant law. So she deals with all the phone calls and the screening and then puts them in there, and then I just take it over from there because there's nothing that happens most months. Nothing. So it doesn't seem like it's necessary. I mean, most people can do it themselves, but I'm also jaded at this point too. Like you have to kind of go through that. You have to understand how people will try to push your buttons and try to manipulate you into letting them into the house that the property management company will not allow them into. So, um, there's all sorts of reasons why. So I think, if you once you've made some mistakes, it definitely makes you better qualified, but you have to be ready to most people just learn that by the hard way, letting someone in who has credit problems. Somebody doesn't meet your criteria and you let them in because they have a sad story or they're a friend or a friend of a friend or a relative of a friend or something. And I don't do that anymore. So you become jaded enough that you have to have a thick skin for that.
And then Dylan has talked with Mike about a midnight Denny's thing. This is your first year going. I'll be there from Friday through Monday. That's going to be kind of a problem, Dylan. We'll definitely hang out Saturday and Sunday. We'll be at the one rental at a time event. The midnight Denny's meetups are Wednesday and Thursday because Friday night we're going to have to get some sleep for the event. Saturday night we're going to have to get some sleep for the event. Uh, so we'll definitely see because I don't know if this is your first year going to the event, Dylan. I mean, there are presenters talking, and there'll be ones you want to, there's ones I want to sit through, right, and listen to them talk. It's all recorded so you can watch it later, but there'll be people like Mike and I will be hanging out in another room, recording videos or just hanging out and talking. So there's a good chance to interact with everybody that's going to be there. I'm going to get to the next question. Some sleep schedule talk. Brian, super chat. Thank you for answering your questions. Awesome. Thank you for the super chat. It's much appreciated. Tells YouTube somebody likes the content. Liz, both my husband and I have 1099 jobs, so looking for something other than normal conventional loans. So if you have tax record histories of consistent income, even if it's 1099, they're usually fine with it.
Yeah,
DSCR is another option.
1099. Always been 1099.
Yeah. It's good to know. Okay. Go, Jack. Michael, see you at Denny's. By the way, the offer still stands about doing 1,000-yard shoots. If you're ever in PA, I'm building another rifle, so we won't have to wait. There you go. Sounds like fun. Mike and I need to go back to Florida together and do the shooting from the helicopter thing together. Dylan, my sleep schedule. Yep. Coming into Vegas on Wednesday. I will be at both Denny's meetups. Awesome. Bring like an extra $5. They usually don't have, last year they had one waitress for everybody that showed up. So do a good tip because she was working. Okay. Dion wannabe. I have a cash pair that I would like to move into an online or check, thinking about giving a discount if paying online when the lease renew time. So instead of a discount when you do lease renew time, talk about an increase that you can waive if they move on to paying the way you want. That people don't like free. People don't like discounts. People like getting charged less for something they expected to cost more. So I'd propose the higher rent, but say we can keep it the same or go up less if you can go to these formats or show them. It's hard. I've got a couple cash payers. I've got two check payers, like physical. I actually have to deposit one today. Today's the 4th, right? Um, I will spend a couple of seconds on making money today. It's terrible.
That landlord work.
And I'm trying to keep track of that to figure out how much I
Depositing the
actually
check.
spend. All the rentals go on your Schedule E, so losses are on one rental will balance the gains on other rentals. Just did my taxes over the weekend. Yeah, hopefully you're doing that right. My tax guy has a schedule for each property. Nicole, my averages in Utah are way even. Rents are top of the market. Seller buying down interest rates 20 to 25% down. There you go. Nice. Wombat Striker. I'm behind, but 3 quotes powerful. Even if your primary residence recently had a heater issue, 12 to 14,000 quote from first company, 4,000 from second, 3,800 from the third. Quality just as good. Yeah, I always get 3 quotes. If you Google search and you find the name of a contractor or company, a plumber or electrician, don't go off any of the first 10. They're spending tens of thousands of dollars on Google AdWord placement, and you're going to pay for that when you hire them.
Yeah,
If
or if you
somebody
hear their ads on the radio or TV, forget it. They will be twice as much as everybody else.
and if they show up with a uh, you call it a tablet and they want to spend 15 minutes talking about their warranty, don't hire them. The warranty is the same as everyone else because it's provided by the manufacturer, no matter what they say, and it'll cost you 3 times everybody else. So, Dennis, have some faith in Hemlane. You always say have a PM at a distance, but Diane is always saying they can work investors at a distance, teasing you mostly. So I think Hemlane would do it. I'm doing a reverse engineered way where I bought all my properties where I live, but I can manage from a distance when I'm traveling with Hemlane. So I totally believe that's a thing, but I have the systems in place and I have my group of handy people that you can call at any point in time, and one won't be available, but somebody else will. Can I get the address of the dentist meetup? Jared, I think he'll have to be with his kids. If somebody else has the address to the dentist, please share it. We do, Ryan, it's in the school community. You had a bad time with Hemlane, bad experience, negative experience. Let me know about it. I haven't had a bad experience with him yet. I believe we are all caught up on questions unless I missed some. So if I missed some, please put it in again. And so you're in on the 13th, you said, or 12th?
Yeah. Flying in midday on what is that, Thursday, the 13th, I think.
Going to any shows once you get to Vegas?
Have made no plans. If you guys are going to a show, let me know.
Well, we are on the first day. I don't know about after that. I think
Oh,
we're
okay.
fairly open currently. I remember
Yeah.
last time we took Mike to watch his first burlesque. It's always fun to take your Mormon friend to
I
go
know,
see
right?
people dance naked.
Yeah. I should look. I haven't made any plans other than Friday morning. I was gonna maybe go out to Red Rock and do some like hiking out there. I'm not a big hiker, but just like, easy hike, enjoy the scenery a little bit. Um, uh, and I don't know. Then I just figured I would just play it by ear, see what all the gang is doing, and you know, I've got wheels.
Nice. I think
Oh,
Melanie and Mike will have wheels there this time too,
yeah.
driving from Florida.
What?
Mike
Really?
should share this information himself. Yeah. He'll be driving from Florida
He's
to
got a lot to catch up on with everybody.
Yes.
He's been very conspicuously absent for a long time. Busy, I know. Work.
So
Yeah.
what does your investing look like for 2025?
Yeah. So honestly, I feel like I'm at a point where I'm just kind of cruising. So I don't know if you remember when we did my portfolio. I know you remember we did that on the school. We did a video with the three amigos and me looking at my portfolio. I'm liking the size it is, and I feel like I've gotten rid of the problem properties. Um, I'm still just working on getting caught up with some setbacks from 2023. And there's one big rehab that we're still working on finishing that it's like the end of all rehabs, and I never want to do another one again. And I don't know, I'll eat those words, I'm sure, but I'm so tired of it. It's been going on for years now. So a giant 1908 rotten pumpkin of a house. So, but it'll be like brand new when it's done. And we had talked about maybe building out those extra lots. I don't even remember me talking about that, but it doesn't pencil to do that. So I think that'd be foolish to do. So I may just, who knows, sell those lots. I'm not sure. But I don't feel like I need to necessarily have more. I think I can work with what I have and optimize it. There's a lot that I can do with what I already have. And it might be if I feel like some of these properties I bought have been upzoned, like they work as a single family rental, but you can put townhouses on it, for example, or a mixed use building or things like that. I don't think I want to build townhouses, but it might be interesting to work on getting something like that approved and permitted and then maybe sell it to a builder and 1031 into something else. I don't know.
Life is interesting when you have choices.
It is, yeah. So, um, yeah, it's interesting because I've always been in grow, grow, grow mode no matter what. Um, but maybe it's just a factor of my age or something, but I'm not feeling that I need to keep being in that extreme growth mode forever. I know you're about like doing the most with the fewest properties, and there's wisdom in that. So I don't need to, and I don't go by door count or anything like that. It's not about that. So that's a just a pride metric more than anything else. So,
Yeah,
but who knows? So go ahead.
I was talking with Christian this morning, interviewed like for a video on his channel, and he was talking about it's like chess, when you have pieces to move, there's a lot of moves you can make, and there's a lot of people who just have their W-2. They just have their job. It's the only
Mhm.
move they have to make, and that's a scary position to be in.
Yeah.
There is a question here from Money. Howdy. At the time of closing, if there was already a tenant with existing lease, do I need to get that lease moved over to mine plus tenant's name? I know the answer, but I will let you handle that.
Yeah. I mean, are you legally required to? No. I mean that lease survives your it doesn't matter who owns the property, the lease survives. So, but that said, it is good to start a new lease in your name. So, and sometimes I usually ask for in the past have asked for a property to be vacant. I don't like to take on tenants. So I prefer to get my own. But I know you like to go in and do your binder, and I've done that before too. So it depends on the circumstance and it depends on what those tenants, I bought that same property that we're remodeling. It had tenants in it, and they're like, maybe you want these people in here while you're getting permitting. And no, I do not want because you could just look around and tell that they were no good, and I don't want those folks in my property, so forget it. But I remember another one where it seemed like the numbers were good. The lease was, you know, it's easy just to just come on in, and actually it helped me get the property because I didn't have to uh have them vacate it. But just know sometimes you can be inheriting someone else's problem that they're not going to be telling you about. So, because you didn't screen and place that person, they did. And you can look and see if they've been consistently paying, but sometimes there's parts of the story that you don't know. But what do you think, Dion?
So on the lease thing, you're absolutely, I agree with Beth 100%. And the lease is between tenant and property. So the lease holds. So even if you got them to change it from a new lease with their name and your name, it would have to be all the same stipulations with the tenant. You couldn't
You can't
force the
change
tenant to
terms.
change the deposit,
Yeah.
the rents, the fees, or anything like that, or where they can park or any of that. They're bound by the existing lease. So I've never changed a lease. The thing to note is, when does that lease end? And what is the notification requirement for your area? So if you'll buy a property with tenants in place, Beth is right. I like to use the binder strategy. I prefer to buy rent ready or already occupied properties. And we have to give 60-day notice for a rent increase outside of King County and outside of City of Tacoma. Now it's like 6 months, and there's a bill to make it 6 months coming up, could go through. So 90 days before, I'll do the binder strategy, get the tenant to agree to a new amount, then I'll make the lease, but say it's for 3 months from now to meet that requirement. You follow up with, do I need a trust account to collect rents? No, they're going to say talk to an attorney. An attorney's always going to say you need a trust, you need an LLC, you need all kinds of things that make them money. None of my properties are in a trust. None of my properties will ever be in an LLC.
I think they want the
I
deposit to
regular
be in a trust account, like technically.
I just have a regular bank, or it's an interest-bearing account is what the RCW, the Revised Code of
Yeah.
Washington requires. So your state might have a different thing. You just go to your bank and it's just make a regular account that bears interest. It doesn't tell you
Yeah.
what interest it has to bear, and it's a separate one to store your accounts in, your
Yeah,
deposits.
you're not supposed to mix it with your own funds because they don't want people to spend somebody else's deposit and then not have it when they are to get it back.
Yep, I hear that all the time. I have never encountered a landlord who has had the issue, or somebody asked them, "Let me see your bank structure."
Never once.
Absolutely see a tenant not getting their deposit ending up in a court problem and you getting all the fees. But yeah, so have the money.
Yeah. And
Uh,
I've seen lenders use those for reserves, even though they're really not reserves, but they just see it as money in your name. A little side note there, not advising anyone to do that, but
so I did a video with BiggerPockets yesterday with Dave Meyer.
awesome.
And
Love Dave Meyer.
did you know he's in Seattle now?
What? No?
Yeah, no. So we're gonna have to figure out how to get around
Oh,
him because I like him. I watch him all the time. But we
yeah.
did 10 things that I do backwards. And it was really fun to make the video to watch because there's this thing, I don't know if you noticed this or not. I like to do videos with Zuber where I share a thought that like breaks his brain. I just thoroughly enjoy that.
The
So
counterintuitive.
it's
Yeah.
what it is. They called it, he said there are counterintuitive 10 Dionisms. That's what he called it. So
Mhm.
that's kind of cool. And he doesn't know me. He doesn't watch my stuff. He doesn't know who I am from anybody, right? Um, I watch his stuff. So we went over, I don't raise my rent, my tenants do. So he kind of knew about the binder strategy because he's with BiggerPockets.
Yeah.
I want my leases to end in the winter. He did not. It start out understanding that, but he got it by the end. Um, I want from the MLS with tenants in place. So backwards to what you just said, you want vacant. You don't want to deal with somebody else's problems. I wanted the right amount of cash flow from the least amount of units. So I don't want a big property. So it's counterintuitive. I house hack to retire, not just to start. Um, I don't want good school districts. It's like in one of my criteria of things I don't want. He broke his brain on that one too, because he said he has all
That
of
breaks
them.
my brain, honestly, too. But
Well, I don't want the high
it
taxes.
works for
That's where
you.
the good school
Yeah.
district comes from. And I don't want the tenant turnover that comes from kids aging out of schools. Uh, I'm 100% real estate, so I don't diversify. That's counterintuitive. No LLC. He's 100% LLC because a lot of his is partnerships. So he
Yeah, I
couldn't
can see him
his head
being.
around that. Um, I don't want paid off properties. I think that's scary. And I don't touch equity. Like going through this list of 10, it was kind of fun because you know me, you've heard 95% of that probably at some point in a video or us talking somewhere. So who cares? Some of it you might disagree with. He hadn't heard 80% of those ever said
Wow.
out sentences. It was great. So
Well, and if I haven't watched their podcast much in a while, although I do like his podcast on the market is my favorite one there at Bigger Pockets is the best one. But well, so many of their guests have been about leverage, buy, bigger, 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 take your equity and all those things that you were, yeah, the opposite.
and now I think Bigger Pockets is really changing. They've had Coach Carson on in the last couple of weeks. They reached back out to me and they were like, "Hey, we want to talk to people who you don't need to have a million properties and you're just trying to reach financial freedom and so they're trying to do that." And then I've Dave in Washington, I forget his first name, uh,
Oh, Henry.
Henry
What?
Washington, right? Did a video on how you don't retire off rentals and you just create a job. And I was like, that's one of the mistakes that the top three mistakes that I talked about at the beginning of this was don't turn real estate into a job. It's not a job for me. It's a couple hours a month. And for somebody like that, they're just in growth mode. I think they're stuck in growth mode, which is not bad.
Some
Let
people
me
get
see if
addicted
it'll,
to growth mode and that's all they know and that's all they want to know. That's fine for them.
I want to keep my properties cute. It will help establish a price structure in the area. Did I miss something else from Julie? If I don't create a new lease, am I allowed to inform the tenant to send rents to new account? Yes.
Yes.
So let me read the whole question. I'm sorry. If I don't create a new lease, am I allowed to inform the tenant to send rents to a new account after I close on the property since the old lease asked them to send to property management accounts? Yes, you're going to create what is called a landlord introduction letter. Google will find several formats for it. I start with, here's the date of the property sale. Here's who I am. Here's how to contact me. Here are some issues I might be addressing if you had a property inspection, fixing a screen, replacing lights, coded locks. I'll be reaching out for that. At the very bottom of it, almost like the last thing mentioned, how you pay your rents going forward. I don't start with, I'm the new owner, money matters. I don't just put it at the top of the
Yeah.
letter. It's in there kind of towards the bottom after several points to make it a communication and include all the touch points of how you talk to me, how I preferred to have it. The text preferable. I'll move it to emails if I need to. Uh, and then maybe set up, just leave it vague. I would like to set up a time to meet face to face if you're self-managing. So a landlord introduction letter will also include, here is how you will pay the rent going forward, and indicate, make sure you say, don't pay it to the previous,
Yeah.
way you were paying it.
And ask them what their concerns are. I think people appreciate that. If there's something that maybe they want, you don't have to do it, but at least, be open to it, hearing what
Yeah.
matters to them.
Cool. We will probably be wrapping up here unless there's any other questions that jump in. And we have a
Okay.
members only class starting at 6 tonight where we will analyze a deal that Sam is going to be presenting. If Sam is, I haven't seen him in the chat tonight, so I'll have to reach
Love
out.
it. Okay.
Cool.
Analyze your deals. Sounds good. Thank you for having me on again, and I'll see
No,
you.
you're
And
always welcome, and I appreciate you reaching out whenever you
oh
have the
yeah,
time.
you let me crash your party, and I think that's so fun. So I don't have to have my own channel. I just crash other people's channels. It's the best world for me. So
And it's funny, if you made your own channel, you'd probably blow up and have a bigger channel than all of us anyway. So
oh, I don't know, but that sounds like a job to me though. So,
it,
I don't I
that's
don't
the
need
thing to
that
be
job, but
that's the thing to be careful with is, uh, especially with YouTube. Zuber turned it into a job there for a while. Didn't even have days. He was doing 7 days a week, 5 hours a day,
I know.
watching a live. And I called him. I said, I have this friend. He just works in YouTube 7 days a week. And then he started taking off Friday and Saturday.
I
And
watched, yeah, I saw that. I think I was watching that live, and then I did notice that right after that he pulled back a little bit, as he should. It's like
you
you don't want
should.
to go for burnout.
And so,
So,
so, so I've had people tell me that I'm not retired because I do YouTube. And I was thinking about it. No one's ever accused me of not being retired because I scuba dive, and nobody's ever accused me of not being retired because I paddleboard, or accused me of not being retired because I want to travel to other countries. So if you're doing something because it's fun, you're retired. But if YouTube makes a little bit of money, and it makes about 10,000 a year for me, so it's not like it's hundreds of thousands. I'm not like the next Graham Stephan, but it makes about a third of what it costs to have a channel, right? Uh, I'm not retired because this makes money. But I have as much fun doing this as I do doing traveling or scuba diving or hanging out with, like, I wouldn't know you, I don't think, if I didn't have a YouTube channel. I wouldn't know Millennium Mike or Zuber or any of the friends I've
yeah,
made over the last 5 years. So
it's something you do for free. And the that's a whole interesting topic, is how do you define retirement? Because for some people, yeah, there's this whole scale of what people consider retired. Everything from working full time at a W-2 to like literally sitting on the couch doing nothing 100% of the time. And it's like there's this whole everything in between. And for some people, they think they're retired as soon as they quit their W-2. And me, who's never had a W-2, I'm like, well, I'm not retired. But I don't have a W-2. I work for myself and create my own hours. So, um, and so I think it's going to be a different definition for a lot of people. And it's like, it doesn't mean you're not doing anything. Maybe for some people, being retired means you do nothing. But those are usually people that suffer emotionally and physically and live a shorter life. Like, you have to have purpose in your life, especially if you're going to retire at a younger age. You have to have things to do that you're passionate about, whether it's volunteering, or maybe it is for some people taking a lower paying job that wouldn't pay your bills before, but you can do that now because it's satisfying and you don't need it. But maybe it's having a YouTube channel that you spend 5 hours a day on, like Mike Zuber, and I'm sure he considers himself retired. So, or does he? I never asked him that question, but
I think he does, because he could stop. He doesn't need the money, right? So it's kind of like in your case. I think if you retired, you'd still be managing your rentals.
yeah.
So how would you define retired? It would be you don't have a real estate license. You don't have an
Yeah.
office with employees. Your husband doesn't have a contractor's license. Like you
Hmm.
take all the things that have been, this is how we make our money, and you set them to the side and you go, okay, we're just going to enjoy the money that comes from our assets. So I don't know that you would ever do that. I think you enjoy having the realtor
Yeah.
interaction with property sales, whether they're your own or someone else's. And enjoying something is very different than having an alarm clock, a boss, a schedule.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't get the money from the job, you don't get to eat next month. Like, that's the big difference. Financial freedom.
Right.
Uh, so yeah,
For
people.
me, I think it probably would mean delegating more and me not being directly in a sales role anymore, where I'm not interacting with the clients. But I don't know that I ever would do that, because I really like it and I'm really good at it. So,
Yeah.
you know,
So I talk often that you can invest in stocks, you can invest in crypto, you can invest in real estate, or you can start and grow a business and get it large enough to where somebody else runs the day to day. So if you grew your business to where you outsourced, had somebody else doing everything, and you weren't doing all that kind of stuff, then you could actually be retired but still own the business.
yeah, and I
So
literally could do that today, and I have done that for periods of time before. So, and everything is systemized and can run 100% without me. So, it probably wouldn't be, I would like to, well, a part of me would like to think it wouldn't be as profitable, but then again, isn't that what we would want, is to be as profitable or more without me? I want to feel needed, I guess, to some extent, but
my brother chimes in with, retirement for me is having a cold beer in my hand, watching my brother work on a YouTube channel. We're going to end it with that. You guys have an
there you
evening.
go. Touche. All
And we'll see you
right.
all in Vegas next week.
All right.
But not my brother, because I'm not taking him with me.
Oh, well, he'll be watching the live stream maybe with a beer in his hand,
He probably will
maybe
be.
for a minute. Yeah.
Nice. Cool. We are off